Good morning, this is David Benson with Cornhusker Hybrids LLC in Lincoln, Nebraska, where our trademark and mantra is success starts with a seed. Hey, I want to put a quick message in here. It'd really help me if I could get some more people to subscribe and get me to 1,000, and I would be able to probably go to some kind of a lecture format or something and actually have a really way to do this rather than what I do. But anyway, please, if you can, subscribe. It doesn't really hurt you, I don't think, and it helps me. So I'm going to start today what I'm going to call my Shattering the Myth series. There are many, many myths within breeding and the way people think and the things that they emphasize in their programs and what they believe in. And I have the things that I've learned that I believe in. And so I'm going to share those with people, and they can, do as they want, but it's information. So anyway, I'm talking about Shattering the Myth series. How much note keeping? When we talk about note keeping, physically taking the time and recording notes and later analyzing these notes is really needed to have a successful breeding program. Now, I'm going to say to start with, it depends, but there's some factors. Time. You only have so much time. And how important are some of the notes you take? I see data coming in from countries, not in the U.S., but countries where it looks like the only reason they're taking these notes is because they need to have something to do because they're so meaningless. I mean, like Simmet has, you get a list of like 100 notes of things that you could take out in the field. And I'm like, who uses this? No one, as a matter of fact, but people are doing it. So why are they doing it? Why are researcher directors telling them to do it? And why are they doing it if it doesn't have any value? And I would say a lot of them don't. So how many notes are needed? And you have to decide on which traits and how you're going to do it and how you're going to analyze it and what it means. And you're going to have to put some design and thought into successful note keeping, and most people don't. First thing you've got to decide is what traits do you need outside of yield to have a successful product. And that depends a lot on what kind of product you have. I mean, if you're doing sweet potatoes or you're doing turf grass or you're doing canola or wheat or rice, or whether you're doing maize or popcorn or whatever, those traits vary. But there's some that, only a few that are really important besides yield. And then how many reps, locations, and years do you need to feel confident in this data? And you know what? I've been at this long enough now, like almost 35 years or more, that I've got a really good idea of the phenotype I'm looking for in my crop, which is dent corn, but I also work in popcorn and yellow corn, and or white corn, and they're much different because popcorn is probably the essential specialty crop, and white corn's a little bit different because it's used for human consumption, and there's a lot of different markets and areas where it's grown, and everything matters. But I've been at it long enough to recognize the Midwest, USA, and lots of places in the world, I call rest of the world, best phenotype. And for me, that's early flowering, moderately short, reasonable ear height, great harvest appearance, of course, big ears on strong stalks, but good stay green and fast dry down. And if I could pick the time, the only time I would go to field the whole entire year, it would be the day the combine's there and right in front of the combine. And actually, I've actually done this before, where I was just staying ahead of 2 combines in the field, small ones, but harvesting. And there's a lot of interesting things that's going on when you're looking at corn right like that and taking notes. Now, normally, realistically, you're there some 2 days to a week ahead of time if you want to really have that harvest look. And that's what I really do. So if I pick one day to take notes, it's going to be right at harvest. If I pick in my area traits that matter to me besides dry corn over the scale, it's early flowering for maturity, moderately short, low to medium ear placement, harvest appearance, you can see that phenotype, it's standing well, stay green, and fast dry down. And those are things that are really outside of early flowering and plant height are kind of hard. They're all subjective, right? And so, how much do you need? So the data must discriminate for major traits. Now, one thing that I used to do, and I will tell you that if you're looking to discriminate for major traits, you're going to have some kind of checks somewhere in those locations where you can discriminate that are good and bad for those traits. And so you can contrast them. And I used to put together years ago, like 8 or 10 hybrids that I grew 2 reps or 3 reps on every location I had, designed to tell me whether to take notes or not when I got to the field. And we would go to these 3 reps first before we started taking notes, walking endlessly, taking stock lodging notes when they're all zeros and ones, and when you're not pushing. And we would go to those checks that, if you go and your poor material standing, why would you take notes on that whole field? Or what would you think about it? I mean, everything's standing there. There's no discrimination. Or if you were working for, say, gray leaf spot, and your susceptible didn't look susceptible. Or if you're working for brittle snap and your susceptible hybrids standing 100%, why would you? Now that's a little bit different one because you'll know if you have it because it happens during the growing season. But still, by the time you get there at harvest, it doesn't look near the same as it did, say, in June or July when it snapped off. So discriminate checks. If you don't have any discrimination between them, why are you taking notes? What valuable are? When I was in Pioneer, we put mountains and mountains of data into the system that didn't discriminate. It had no value. It actually makes things look better than they are. And if you really wanted to get at stock lodging, you had to put out all this other data and just pick the locations that you had that were maybe more than 10% lodged or something and use those or maybe more than 20. I mean, you got to have some discrimination. So that's a big deal. So how many notes do you need? And I'll say you don't need very many, and you don't need to take very much time. And I will also say that all these other 50 notes that you're taking, whatever they are, you probably don't need them. Who's going to use them? We're just putting people in the field to burn money, to drive around, to get out of the office. I mean, come on. And research directors, why are you taking thousands of pages of notes, tying up your computers at harvest time that nobody needs, plus all that work to do it? It makes no sense. So I'll just give you a couple examples here. I'll give you one example, and then I'm going to close this out. So I do some work in popcorn. Popcorn is a unique crop within the maize group because it has a certain use, like in concessions, where you buy popcorn at home, where you buy ready to eat, or when you buy your own popcorn and you do it at home and you eat it during a football game, or while you're watching a movie and you get your whole family together. It's a great thing to bring people together. It's very unique, but the number one thing in popcorn is not yield per acre. That's very important, and it's not really any of the other traits. The number one the most important thing in popcorn is to get as much expansion as you can. And expansion means you take so many kernels and you put them and pop them, and they expand so much. And when you go to the movie theater and they give you that big bucket of popcorn, the better expansion there is in there for the price is better for the company selling the popcorn. And it's also good for you because you like those big flakes. Most people do. Sometimes you want the white popcorn with the smaller flakes or something else. But it's a very, very market-driven profit from that end. And if you don't have enough expansion to go to the market, it absolutely does not matter what else you got. Now, if you had enough yield or you have something else, you can use that line as a breeding line in your program, but you're not going to make a hybrid out of it. I mean, if your expansion is, say, these are kind of low numbers for some. Let's just say they're 46. If you don't, within a certain population, if you're working out of that material and you don't have expansion of at least 46, what are you doing? And if you're not getting anything over that, you need to look at your program and ask where your genetic diversity is. So that's kind of how that goes. So I'm just going to say that I was in a situation where the fellow did not think that I was taking enough notes. I wasn't taking enough notes. Let's just leave it that way. So we went out. He wanted me to go out, and I should have been taking emergence notes when coming out. And there's like 400 plots in this field, okay? And it's just like, this was my point about, if you're going to take something like emergence notes, you don't take it on your, in the middle of the run, your first year top crosses, your second. You wait until you get something that's good enough to go to commercial, and then you design an emergence test, which is where you make sure you got the good emergers and the poor emergers. And normally you plant it early, like in Nebraska, we might even plant it in March or the first week of April, so that you can put some cold stress on it. What the fellow was wanting me to do was to go out and say the 10th of May in perfect emergence conditions, perfect weather, perfect moisture, and try to discriminate between 400 hybrids. And absolutely, I can tell you, it would have been dumb for me to spend my time to do that. And I know that because you're not going to see anything that you want when you have perfect emergence conditions. You can't run an emergence trial. It's a waste of time. And especially, you don't do it on 400 or 1,000 hybrids that are early on and waste your time. You spend your time in your program on your later material that has the best chance of commercial market success, and you know all you can about it, as much as you can possibly know before you commercialize it. So that is a case that those notes would have been absolutely 100% a waste of time, and you can think about a lot of more instances like that in your program. You should be taking notes that help you, that fill in the gaps that you don't know for sure about your primary market limiting traits. You know, in Nebraska, we have a trifecta. We call it Goss's wilt, brittle snap, and drought tolerance. We have to have those three things or we can't have a product. After that, I don't worry a lot, because if the highest yielding materials coming out of our trials, it must be the best for those traits under the conditions they were exposed to. So I want you, everybody in your program, to think about how much time you're spending taking worthless data that you're never going to use, that has no value, that just takes you to the field. And go in the field when you can learn something and you can really see what's going on, and that adds value to your program. And don't just go out and take notes just to take a note on 60 traits. I mean, like tassel angle, number of root things, you know, how many nodes, whatever it is, a million things about the leaves and things that just don't matter, and concentrate on the things that do. And your program will be a lot more successful. You'll be a lot more happier. And I can talk like this because this is my personal program. This is my personal time that I have to use to balance my life the way a life should be, that took me a whole career to figure out. And it needs to be a lot less time in the field and a lot less time doing other things. And I can be real successful. And I'm sure you all can too. So today I'm going to close this. This is David Benson with Cornhusker Hybrid LLC in Lincoln, Nebraska, where whatever you're doing today, planting, harvesting, or pollinating, we're lucky to do it, and love your job, love your work, because we're working in a business where you only need to get 1% right and they'll build a monument to you. And that's the way it is. So have a great harvest season. I will see you next time, and we will close out here now. Have a great day.